Yeah, no, great. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity here, Phil, and thank you everyone for hanging on to the bitter end. I hope hope I won't disappoint. That should be my screens shared there. Hopefully,
Yeah.
Lucy Ann, I know you've been doing a brilliant job sharing the slides in the chat as well, in case because mine has been flickering in and out a bit. So if you're able to keep doing that, that'd be awesome. Thank you very much. So I think this will actually follow on quite neatly from Paul's presentation there, in the sense of trying to use role play to a degree within assessment, and I guess authentic assessment is the buzzword that's kind of around at the minute, isn't it? But this is something we've been doing for a little while here at Harper, but we'd initially framed it slightly differently in terms of industry readiness and how we can build that into our assessments. So just very quickly, just about Harper Adams and myself, for anyone that doesn't know us, we're blessed with a lovely rural campus in Shropshire. It's near Newport, but if you say Newport, people tend to think of Wales, and we're not down in Wales, but we're sort of in the Telford Shrewsbury area. And we try and focus as much as we can on applied learning. We've got some fantastic facilities, a lot of space. We do a lot of agriculture courses here, and we have a commercial working farm on our campus. So we really like to get students kind of out and about and doing things. And all of our courses across the entire institution have a placement year in year 3 as well. So we have quite strong links with industry already, which has helped us here in what we've been trying to do. I'm in quite an unusual position, I guess, in the sense that I studied here as a student more years ago than I care to work out now, but did a course called Off-Road Vehicle Design, which was the predecessor to the courses we're doing now, but then didn't work in the off-road sector at all, went and worked for Bentley Motors, did a lot with the Volkswagen Group, and worked with Porsche and Audi, followed by almost 3 years at SAIC, which most people would know as Shanghai Automotive. So making MG was the brand that we had in this country. And then I returned to Harper late 2018 as a lecturer, and just about got my head around this whole teaching gig in time for a small thing called COVID-19, which obviously then turned everything up on its head. So it was an interesting start to my academic career. One of the things we've sort of been looking at, really said, for a few years, and where a lot of this came from, Engineering UK releases an annual publication titled the State of Engineering. And one thing that they did a few times a few years ago was survey hundreds of UK employers of engineering and technology graduates. And they found, worryingly, that there was 64% of employers were not satisfied with the industry readiness of graduates, and that this was getting worse. So it was 2016 that figure was published. A couple of years before that, it was 50%. So really, significant numbers of employers are not satisfied with graduates they're getting, and getting worse. And that came from a review that had been done by Wacom, which highlighted the same thing and was talking about ensuring that STEM degrees are actually relevant for employer demand and the skills that students need, and has been backed up since by Royal Academy Engineering Works and various other publications as well. So this is a real problem that we seem to have fallen into, particularly in the engineering sector, possibly in other sectors as well. So that was a worry for us, and we tried to sort of go, okay, well, so what does that mean? What is industry readiness? So we had a chat with a number of our placement employers and graduate employers and sort of alumni who'd gone out and were now working, and said, what do you want from our graduates? And the general feeling was that they had a very good theoretical knowledge. They had a very good, underpinning in terms of engineering, this, that, and the other. But the employers felt they were the ones left to turn them into engineers. Was a phrase we kind of got given a lot. There was a bit of a debate as to whose job this is. There was a lot of companies saying, well, look, we're having to set up graduate schemes to take students and actually turn them into, the person that we want. And so there was a big debate. Well, actually, is that a university's job, or is that the employer's job, or where does that sit? This, that, and the other. But fundamentally, what seemed to be lacking, the information we were getting back, was that sort of day-to-day professionalism and working, and that kind of the ability to actually present their work, you know, in a meeting, to management, to a director, whatever, and to work within that professional environment, even down to how do you book meetings, how do you, you know, set something up in somebody's diary, how do you plan a project, how do you interface with other departments, you know, that kind of being an engineer rather than perhaps knowing some engineering, and, you know, and then being subtly different. Whilst the debate was kind of raging as to, well, whose responsibility actually is that anyway, we took a slightly different tack and said, well, it actually aligns with pedagogic research anyway. So, you know, and I really like this quote from MacArthur, you know, we should shift our focus from tasks that students are doing, and instead have as a primary concern the person that the student becomes through the engagement with assessment. So putting the student and the person in the middle of it. And that's backed up by all sorts of other works I'm sure people are familiar with in terms of focusing on skills and the person. And I said the whole authentic assessment debate has kind of, you know, been born out of the same thing. And, you know, you get a better engagement, better results, and hopefully, you know, if we do all of that, which pedagogically we should be doing anyway, then actually we're going to satisfy this industry concern as well. There's a couple of colleagues here at Harper, Dave Allen, Greg Rousel. Dave Allen not here anymore, but was at the time. It's perhaps quite an engineering way of looking at it, but describing a curriculum as a process and saying, well, what we get are school leavers nominally. You can sort of decide what that actually means, but nominally that's what we get. And by the time they leave, they should be ready to be professional engineers. And our curriculum is whatever goes in that gap. So that was how we've tried to structure a number of things over the last few years. And I just want to go through like one example of how we've tried to implement that. So I run a module in second year. It's for all engineering students, and it's called Engineering Design. It runs for the whole year, and we go from start to finish effectively through a design process. So they take a very broad customer brief. They write a specification for what's needed, design a product, build and test that product, and then at the very end of the year we have like a trade show and a test day, and they try and sell their product in inverted commas to some guests. We have three kind of flavors within that to make it relevant for the particular engineering course that they're on. So the challenges that we set, our agricultural engineering students are tasked with designing and making an autonomous weeder. So we give them a camera system and some actuators, and they use sort of you know, a visual input to create an automated weeder that can detect and remove weeds but leave plant heads undisturbed. Automotive engineering students are looking at a suspension concept for an off-road buggy that we're trying to make a bit more on-road friendly, and how they could tweak the suspension to do that. And our mechanical engineering students are looking at a robot arm concept and how they can improve the functionality of a robot arm for something that might be used for packaging things at the end of a production line, or that's, you know, a sort of pick and place robot, and how they can improve that. I run the module with a colleague, Paula Gwinnett. She acts as a customer, so she kind of, you know, takes on the role play element, if you like. And she has a wig and everything. She gets into it far too much, but she plays a very good customer. And we have key gateways as we go through the module, similar to you would if you were doing, you know, a design project in industry. So this is kind of how the module is laid out. These are week numbers here. So we launched the assessment in week 1, and we have a formative presentation, so it's entirely formative in week 4, where the students in their groups will present their specification and their plan. So that's just to check they've understood what's being asked. They will then go away, and in week 11 they will present a digital prototype. We have a sort of halfway design review that is marked, that is summative, and then in week 17, which is around the second half of February, they have their final design and they present that as well. And then after that, we will order the parts that they want. They can build their products, they can test their products, and the very last week of term, we have this product launch day, and I've got some pictures and things in a moment to show that off. Those two presentations, though, the one, so week 11 is just before Christmas, and week 17 at the end of February. They're presentations, they're in a boardroom, and they are attended by guests from industry. So the first one, we just invite 1 or 2 guests. The second one, we invite a few more, and we sort of slowly ramp up the pressure on students. They are mostly alumni or placement employers. They're people that are sort of friendly to us, so they understand what we're trying to do and they'll support us in it. They're not going to overly grill the students, hopefully. We have had technical advisors to our department sit in as well. Lecturers from other departments have been quite keen to see what we're doing. And also our own technician staff, because if these things are going to be made later in the year, it's useful for them to get a heads up on what to expect. So these are some of the things that we've done. The first year we ran it in a sort of little boardroom setting. This year I was actually managed to commandeer our actual main university boardroom. I managed to boot senior management out of there for a day, and we actually ran these presentations in our boardroom. So it gives the students a very kind of real experience. And then in terms of the feedback, that's done face to face with each group again. Partly for pedagogical reasons, and again, there's a lot of research to support that idea of dialogic feedback and engaging the students in their feedback. But also in industry, you don't get this useful little thing called Turnitin. That's not how you get feedback. So we meet with each group again, and we ask them why they think they got the mark they did. The second time round, we don't actually give them a mark. We ask them what mark they think they deserve, which always starts an interesting conversation. Partly to get them thinking about mark schemes. But again, if you think about what a mark scheme is in an industry setting, it's a contract, it's a work instruction, it's something they've had from their boss or manager or a customer or whatever. So it gets them thinking, in that sort of context. And there are some big learns happen in those sessions. That's really where we see some big penny dropping moments from students. And then at the end of the year, we have like a final product launch, and the students host a trade show. And again, we get a lot of industry guests in for the day, and they determine which of the products they would buy. And there is actually a small percentage of the marks, 5% of the marks for the module, is based on whether somebody from industry is interested in buying their product. And it kind of puts it into context again, because we try and explain to the students you can do some fantastic engineering, but if nobody wants your product, why bother? So this kind of really helps and sharpen the mind in that sort of sense, and it's but it's worth a small number of marks. It doesn't really make an effect, but it drives home a very valuable lesson, and it's good fun, frankly. There are some challenges with running things in this way, and I won't pretend there aren't. It's very intensive. Those days of presentations or feedback can take all day, and there's myself and my colleague in there. So it's a big undertaking. However, we have got 75 students assessed. Paula, who plays the customer, also is the second marker moderator. So we can have them assessed, marked, moderated, and give what we think is good quality personalized feedback to 70 plus students within 2 days. And I don't think I could do that for written reports. So it's a very different way of using time. Timetabling get very irritated with me because obviously it is difficult to timetable, but I do really think it's worth it. It's, it makes such a difference. I think the other big challenge we have is that students go through a massive transformation in this, and they do need support. It's quite hard work. One of these sessions you ran, Phil, a year or so ago, Julie Crane, I think it was, spoke about liminality, and that really hit home with me. I went away and researched that more afterwards, because I thought, yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. The students start in a place, they finish in a place, but in the middle, they're not quite sure what's going on. It all feels a bit betwixt and between and a bit weird and whatever, and we kind of need to help them through that. One of the key things we've brought in, I'm not going to talk about it now in the interest of time, but perhaps I might be able to at a future session. We've linked up with a 4th year module around management and leadership. And the assignment for the 4th year students is to coach the 2nd year teams. So they have that sort of peer coaching, peer support from people that have been through it and seen the benefit of it. And we think that really helps. And there's been some fantastic conversations off the back of that. Very quickly, because I appreciate I'm starting to run out of time, Phil. But just we did get some student quotes and some student feedback from this, and I've asked the group of students who did it in 2nd year what they thought in 2nd year, and then what they think now looking back. And I've tried to pick what I think is a fair reflection, and you can't win them all. I've never been so frustrated and stressed in my life. Okay, that's not really what I want to hear, but okay. But I think, generally there's a sort of, okay, it's a challenge, it's hard, perhaps don't really like it, but I think it probably is teaching me some things. I quite like the quote. I did feel, though, it was giving me the shock I needed to open my eyes into how industry is. And interesting, but was causing some strain with the long hours put in. So students are finding this quite difficult. But if you fast forward to the same students when they get back from placement, and they have a very different view, actually it's extremely valuable. It's really set me up for placement. Actually looking back, yeah, it taught me a lot. I quite like the quote, it is hard at points, but so is life. I think that's probably a fair reflection. And the bit just at the end there, the tough love approach of this module, I personally think is exactly what students need. I'm not sure I'm aiming for tough love. Realistic was what I was aiming for, but again, it's interesting to see the change in tone from students when they're in it to when they reflect on it afterwards. And hopefully some of the things that we're looking to address, is anything on that list really, but the sorts of things that industry said they wanted more of are what we've tried to bake into running something in this way. And certainly the feedback again from students, but also from placement employers, is that it does seem to be working. And I've now got placement employers and alumni asking me when these days are going to be, because they want to clear the day in their diary, because they want to come and support us. And it's been a fantastic response from everybody involved. So that's what we've tried to do. I will take, I'd love to take any questions if we've got the time. If I can just spend 20 seconds for a quick shameless plug, because I'm currently doing some research at the moment into the term authentic assessment and what that actually means in relation to an engineering department, because I'm not sure it's a particularly well-defined term. So if there's anyone still on the call who is kind of related to an engineering department, if you could just spend 10 minutes to fill in a survey for me, I'd really, really appreciate that. Or if there's anyone else in the call who's not engineering but would be interested in having a chat about this, then please drop me an email as well. Would love to talk to you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, James. I absolutely loved that. That was I love these sorts of talks when you we're just talking about how it applies to the real world, and it just looks so cool, that course. If I was I always say this, but there's a couple of the talks and I thought if I have my time again, I'd definitely do your course. The way that you pitched it is just, it looks so exciting, and the fact that you get everyone in, and it just looks brilliant. So yeah, well done. I think what you've done is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Before we go any further, I would just like to give a shout out to Lucy-Ann Pickering. Thank you so much, Lucy. What you've been doing today has been amazing with all of the pictures in the chat. So thank you so much for doing that. Yeah, great work. Before we do have some questions, but if it's okay, I just wanted to ask a quick question. And it was kind of on the last slide when you kind of gave the student feedback. I thought that was so good and so powerful. And what in one particular, we said it gave me the shock I needed in terms of the students. I was just wondering, do you ever show that to your new students, or kind of let your students know that when you see them struggling, just as to why kind of this is happening, or it's basically that they're not alone?
Yeah, so I did this year, actually early this year. It was the first time I tried it, but it worked really, really well. So I'm definitely going to keep it kind of in my arsenal again. But after the first presentation around Christmas time, I think it was a big shock for a lot of the students, and the morale did seem to be dropping. So I found a group of fourth years and said, look, would you like to come into one of my sessions and basically just reassure the second years that stick with it, this is worth it in the long run, kind of thing. And I thought there might be one or two of the keen students actually, they bit my hand off, and they spent a good chunk of the session going, no, stick with it, we like that, this is worth it, we know it's hard, and so on. So and it made a massive difference. I mean, I can try and tell them, they don't listen to me, but to hear it from peers, actually it did have a real effect. Yeah,
that's a great idea. And did the first year students ask the second year students many questions, or were they kind of rabbits in headlights? Or
to start with, they were a bit rabbits in headlights. They did kind of warm up a bit, if you like. I wonder whether I should have perhaps stepped out of the room and let them really just get on with it. But
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I don't know. So I might try that in the future. Maybe they'd be more open if I wasn't eavesdropping. But we're quite, not being a massive institution, we're quite lucky that the students do chat outside of lectures and things. So I think it does filter through, and it seems to be quite effective anyway.
Well, absolutely. The fact that you've got students coming back and so they're biting your hands off just shows that you're doing things right. So yeah, brilliant.
Well, that was a big shock for me. I was quite concerned. Oh my God, how do we get all these guests in? 3 times a year, and it's not been a problem. People are really keen to help us out, and I think employers and everybody see the benefit of it. So it's that bit, ironically, has been one of the easiest bits.
Yeah, okay. We do have some questions in the chat. I'm just going to read out one of them, and this is just for the benefit of the people that don't have the chat open, really. I suspect kind of we all know the answer to this, but I think it's important to say it. And Toby Dan has made the comment in the chat: should industry readiness be the goal of HE? Yeah, I think I know the answer, but I think it's nice to be able to say it.
Yes, I think is the short answer, but it's one of the reasons why I'm now investigating in more depth what we mean by authentic assessment, because it has been pointed out to me that perhaps not everybody wants to go into industry. There might be people who want to go into research or want to go into slightly different areas, and we don't want to exclude them. However, I think actually when you boil it down, I think all of the key underlying things are the same anyway. So I don't know whether industry readiness is the right term. I don't know whether authentic assessment is the right term. I'm not, in terms of the language of it, I'm not sure. But in terms of the principle of it, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, William made a really good point in the chat, and again, this is just for the people that don't have the chat open, where he was saying I think that depends a lot on the discipline being studied and at what level, so whether it's undergrad or postgrad. But these are all really good points, so thank you. Joseph has his hand up. Joseph, I think you should have permissions to unmute your mic now already, if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I've just taken a look at your institutional webpage, and what immediately comes to mind is the relevance of what you do to food production, and how it could be applied to commercial food production in let's say sub-Sahara Africa. So I do not know if your institution would reach out to countries in sub-Saharan Africa in order to bolster food production, and I think that would be an area that you should be looking into, just as a suggestion. And then within the UK, there should be partnering opportunities, because obviously there's the research and development tax credits which are given to companies. So does your institution partner with commercial companies pertaining to research and development? Because obviously you do have commercial applications, and this would really bolster greater production. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's certainly, I'll take the first bit first. Yes, as an institution, we're doing an awful lot around food sustainability. I said we have a kind of agricultural background, and so trying to sort of modernize that, but bring in sustainable food production, everything is one of our key missions. That we have a food department, and I know some of the engineering researchers are actually doing work in various sub-Saharan African countries. So I think that is something we're involved in. I could certainly put you in touch with someone who's more active on that side than I am, if that would be an interesting conversation. In terms of working with commercial entities doing research, again, we do. I've tried at the moment to keep them out slightly from the teaching aspect, because I think teaching second year undergraduates using potentially commercially sensitive research that's under a non-disclosure agreement was frankly a can of worms I just decided I wanted to sidestep, but it does happen in the institution. Maybe there are ways that we could bring it closer to the students. It isn't something we've kind of directly explored yet, although there are people from some of the companies that do like to sit in the presentations and lead on the Q&As that the students inevitably get afterwards.
Brilliant, thanks James.
Thank you, James. Thank you.